He want my number, had to hit him with the fantasizing, got him fiending for this. Thick thighs, got him busting out the gym.
Y'all, lend me your ears. Let me tell you something about social media lies. This woman posts Satan gets busy, but you gotta know when he's working so you can let God handle up on your behalf, sounding all righteous and blessed. But baby, while she was typing about God and Satan, her boyfriend's dead body was literally decomposing in the next room. I said what I said. The devil was definitely busy. Alright, this Facebook post might look inspiring to you, might even make you say amen, but here's what's really twisted. 37-year-old Vanita Lennon had just executed her boyfriend and was letting his body rot in their shared apartment, while Jason Bloomfield's corpse was falling apart just feet from where she laid her head at night. This woman was online talking about divine intervention. For 6 whole days she acted like everything was normal, going to work, chatting up the neighbors, even had the nerve to drive around in her dead boyfriend's car. But when Jason's 15-year-old son stepped foot in that apartment, he walked straight into a nightmare that's gonna follow him forever. And honey, when the police showed up, Vanita put on the performance of a lifetime, fake tears and everything. Girl, can you even imagine? You're watching Shadow Crimes TV, where we bring true crime and domestic violence stories out of the shadows. Subscribe now and join us daily as we uncover the cases that demand to be heard. Don't just watch, be part of the conversation. Now, Jason Bloomfield wasn't nobody special, and I mean that in the best way possible. He was just a regular dude trying to make it in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. At 46 years old, the man wasn't asking for the world. He had his Burger King job where he showed up every single day like clockwork. His co-workers could depend on him. His manager knew he'd be there when the schedule said he would. That's the kind of reliable person Jason was. This man loved the Miami Dolphins with a passion that only true fans understand. You feel me? Win or lose, didn't matter. He was riding for his team. It was one of those simple joys that kept him smiling when life got heavy. But listen, the most important thing in Jason's world was his family. He had a 15-year-old son who was his everything. His mother played a big role in his life too. They were that tight-knit family that checked on each other regularly, so when Jason went missing, people noticed real quick. Jason was sharing an apartment with his girlfriend, Vanita Lennon. From the outside looking in, they seemed like any other couple just trying to figure it out. Sure, they had their issues. Money was tight and they were staring eviction right in the face, but nothing that seemed worth taking somebody's life over. November 23, 2024 started off like any regular day for Jason. He had no clue it would be his last day breathing. Couldn't have known that the woman he trusted, the woman he shared a bed with every night, was about to end his life in the most ruthless way you can imagine. That evening, right around dinner time, neighbors in their apartment complex heard something that was gonna haunt them forever. 6 gunshots rang out from Jason and Vanita's unit. 6 loud pops that shattered the quiet of what should have been a regular Thursday night. Those neighbors had no idea they just heard Jason Bloomfield take his final breath, and they definitely didn't know his killer was already cooking up her next lie. The next morning, November 24th, something unprecedented happened. Jason Bloomfield didn't show up for work. His manager at Burger King kept looking at the schedule, then at the clock, then back at the schedule. Jason was supposed to be there. He was always there, baby. In all his time working at that restaurant, Jason had never been a no-show. Never. He was dependable, the kind of employee managers pray for. If Jason couldn't make it to work, he called ahead. He gave notice. The man was responsible, but not today. Today there was just silence. The manager tried calling Jason's phone, straight to voicemail. Tried again an hour later. Still nothing. By the time Jason's shift was supposed to be over, worry was turning into full-blown panic. This wasn't Jason's character at all. Meanwhile, Jason's family was losing their minds. His mother tried reaching him all day long. No answer. His son called and texted over and over. Nothing. For a man who stayed in constant contact with his people, this silence was screaming volumes. But while everybody else was worried sick about Jason, Vianita Lennon was busy spinning her web of lies. When neighbors asked about those gunshots they heard the night before, Vianita had her story ready. She looked them dead in the face and said a friend of hers had fired those shots somewhere nearby. Just some random incident that had nothing to do with her or Jason. According to her version, she seemed cool as a cucumber about it, almost casual. Like, girl, gunshots went off, and you're acting like somebody just played music too loud. When Jason's family called looking for him, Vianita switched up her whole story. She told them that she and Jason had broken up. According to her lying mouth, Jason was cheating on her with his problematic ex-girlfriend, and she'd had enough of it. She made it sound like Jason just walked out of her life and kept it moving. The apartment that Jason and Vianita shared became eerily quiet. Neighbors who were used to hearing normal life sounds, TV shows, conversations, footsteps, now heard absolutely nothing. It was like the place had turned into a tomb, and honey, that's exactly what it was. Days kept passing. Jason's absence at work continued. His family's calls kept going unanswered. His friends started asking more questions, but Vianita kept up her performance, telling different lies to different people, always having some explanation for why Jason wasn't around. What none of them knew was that Jason was still in that apartment. He'd never left. He couldn't leave. And with each day that passed, the evidence of what Vianita had done was getting harder and harder to hide. Now let me tell you about Vianita Lennon, because this woman wasn't just some random girlfriend who lost it one day. She had a history that should have been flashing red warning signs to everybody around her. Vianita was born in Detroit, Michigan, but had moved down to Florida years before all this happened. She'd been bouncing around Miami-Dade and Broward counties like somebody always running from something. At just 4 feet 11 inches tall, she might have looked harmless to most people, but listen, looks will get you killed out here. What really should have set off alarm bells was her criminal record. Vianita was a convicted felon with a past that included multiple run-ins with the law. This wasn't some first-time offender who made one bad mistake. She was what prosecutors would later call a career criminal, somebody who made breaking the law her full-time job. But if you scrolled through Vianita's Facebook page, you'd see a completely different person. She posted about God, work, family, and living her best life. She shared inspirational quotes and talked about letting God handle all her problems. To anybody just browsing through her posts, she looked like a woman of faith trying to turn her life around. The reality? Baby, it was much darker than that. Behind those holy posts was somebody struggling with serious problems that were about to explode all over the place. Money was the biggest issue crushing them. Vianita and Jason were flat broke, not just tight on cash. They were facing eviction from their Fort Lauderdale apartment. The stress of losing their home was eating both of them alive, but it seemed to hit Vianita especially hard. When people get desperate about money, they sometimes do desperate things. Moving on to their relationship falling apart too. According to what Vianita later told people, Jason was cheating on her with his ex-girlfriend. She described this other woman as problematic and claimed that's why she and Jason had broken up. But here's the thing, and this is important. Investigators would later find out that this whole cheating story was just another one of Vianita's lies. The truth was that Jason and Vianita were still living together when he died. They hadn't broken up. They were just two people under incredible pressure, trying to figure out how to keep a roof over their heads. But while Jason was probably thinking about picking up extra shifts at Burger King or finding a cheaper place to live, Vianita's mind was going to much darker places. Her criminal past had taught her that rules didn't apply to her. Those Facebook posts about Satan getting busy weren't just random thoughts. They were the mindset of somebody who was already planning something evil. The combination was toxic, y'all. A career criminal facing eviction, living with a man she claimed was betraying her, all while pretending to be a woman of faith on social media. These weren't just red flags, they were warning sirens that nobody heard in time, and Jason Bloomfield was about to pay the ultimate price for missing those signs. November 29, 2024. 5 days had passed since those gunshots echoed through the apartment complex. 5 days of complete silence. 5 days of unanswered calls and Jason's family going out of their minds with worry. His 15-year-old son couldn't take it anymore. Neither could Jason's mother. They'd been calling, texting, and worrying themselves sick. Jason would never just disappear like this. Something was terribly wrong, and they knew it in their hearts. So they decided to go to the apartment and check on him themselves. Picture this moment, y'all. A teenage boy and his grandmother walking up to an apartment door, probably arguing about who should knock first. They were worried, maybe even scared, but they had no idea they were about to walk into a nightmare that would mess them up for the rest of their lives. They knocked, no answer. They called out Jason's name. Still nothing. Finally, they used their key to get inside. The smell hit them first. Anyone who's ever been around death knows that smell. It's something you never forget in your life. Sweet, sickening, and absolutely unmistakable. But they probably didn't recognize it right away. Maybe they thought something had gone bad in the fridge, or there was a plumbing problem. Then they found him. Jason Bloomfield's body was in a small bedroom, already in what police reports would later describe as advanced stages of decomposition. For 5 days in Florida's heat and humidity, his body had been rotting away while his killer went about her daily business like nothing happened. Imagine being that 15-year-old boy. Imagine walking into a room and finding your father's corpse bloated and decaying. Imagine the scream that probably tore from his throat. Imagine his grandmother trying to shield him from the sight while fumbling for her phone to call 911. The 911 call that came in that day was probably one of the most heartbreaking dispatchers had ever received. A family member finding their loved one dead is tragic enough, but finding them like this mears, after days of decomposition, after wondering where they were and why they weren't answering their phone, it's the kind of trauma that changes people forever. Within minutes, police cars and ambulances were racing toward the Fort Lauderdale apartment. Crime scene investigators were called in. The medical examiner was notified. What had started as a missing person case was now officially a homicide investigation. But here's what makes this story even more twisted. While Jason's son and mother were discovering his body and calling for help, Vianita Lennon was out there somewhere, probably thinking she'd gotten away with murder. Just as police were securing the crime scene and trying to process what they were seeing, something incredible happened. Vianita Lennon showed up. She pulled into the apartment complex parking lot, driving Jason's silver BMW. Think about that for a second, y'all. She was driving her dead boyfriend's car to the scene where his body had just been discovered. The audacity was breathtaking, but what happened next was even more shocking. As soon as Vianita saw the police cars and ambulances, she immediately started crying, wailing, actually making a huge scene about how devastated she was to learn about Jason's death. There was just one problem. The police officer who watched her performance wrote something very specific in his report. He said Vianita was fake crying with no tears. She was making all the sounds of somebody who was heartbroken, but her eyes were completely dry. This wasn't grief, baby. This was acting, and it was terrible acting at that. The officer's trained eye caught what family members might have missed in their own shock and pain. Vanita was putting on a show, and she wasn't very good at it. Real grief doesn't look like a performance. Real tears don't turn on and off like a faucet. But hey, while Vanita was busy with her fake crying routine, detectives were already starting to piece together what had really happened. They talked to the neighbors who'd heard those 6 gunshots on November 23rd. They spoke with Jason's manager at Burger King, who confirmed he'd never shown up for work after that date. Most importantly, they started looking at Vanita's stories, and honey, those stories were falling apart faster than she could tell them. Remember how she told neighbors that a friend had fired those gunshots nearby? Well, detectives checked. No reports of gunshots in the area that night, except from this apartment complex. No police calls about random shooting incidents. Her story was complete fiction, y'all. Then there was the story she told Jason's family about them breaking up because he was cheating. But if they'd broken up, why was she still living in the apartment? Why was she driving his car? Why hadn't anyone else heard about this breakup? The detectives weren't buying any of it. They'd seen enough crime scenes to know when somebody was lying through their teeth, and Vanita's lies were so obvious they were almost insulting. As they processed the scene, more evidence started piling up. The body had been moved. Jason hadn't died in that small bedroom where they found him. There were signs that somebody had tried to clean up blood. A couch had been moved to block the bedroom door. This was calculated, baby. Somebody had killed Jason, moved his body, tried to clean up the evidence, and then went on with their life for 5 days while his corpse rotted away. And that somebody was standing right in front of them, fake crying without a single real tear. As detectives dug deeper into the case, Vanita's web of lies started unraveling like a cheap sweater. Every story she told, every excuse she'd made, every tear she'd faked, it was all about to come crashing down. The first breakthrough came from technology. In today's world, your phone tells a story whether you want it to or not. Detectives pulled Vanita's cell phone records and GPS data, and what they found was damning. Her phone showed she'd been at the apartment on November 23rd when those gunshots were fired. Not nearby, not visiting a friend. She was right there when Jason died. The GPS coordinates placed her exactly where the murder happened, at exactly the time it happened. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Detectives discovered that after Jason was dead, Vanita had been using his phone. She'd accessed his bank account and made Zelle transfers. Think about how cold that is, y'all. Your boyfriend is lying dead in the next room, and you're stealing his money. This wasn't some desperate woman grabbing cash to run away. The transfers happened over several days. She was methodically draining Jason's accounts while his body decomposed just feet away from where she slept. The crime scene reconstruction painted an even more horrifying picture. Jason hadn't died in that small bedroom where his family found him. The blood evidence showed he'd been shot in the living room, probably while he was just sitting there, maybe watching TV or eating dinner. 6 gunshots. That's not somebody who panicked and fired once. That's not self-defense. That's execution. Vanita had emptied her gun into Jason, making sure he was dead. But then came the part that showed just how calculated this murder really was. After shooting Jason 6 times in the living room, Vanita had dragged his body into the small bedroom. A 4-foot 11-inch woman dragging a grown man's dead weight across an apartment floor. Can you imagine that scene? The blood trail, the effort it took, the complete lack of emotion required to grab your boyfriend's corpse and drag it like a piece of furniture. Detectives found evidence of all of this Mita's blood spatter in the living room. Drag marks across the floor, signs that somebody had tried to clean up the mess, but hadn't done a very good job. The cell phone evidence also revealed something else that made investigators' blood run cold. While Jason's family was frantically calling and texting him, worried sick about where he was, Vanita was reading those messages. She was watching his mother panic. She was seeing his son's desperate texts asking where his dad was, and she did nothing. She let them suffer for 5 days, knowing exactly where Jason was and exactly what had happened to him. The GPS data showed Vanita had left the apartment multiple times during those 5 days. She'd gone to work, she'd run errands, she'd driven around in Jason's car like nothing had happened, all while his body was rotting in their shared bedroom. But perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence was what she'd posted on Facebook during this time. Remember that post about Satan getting busy? She'd written that while Jason's corpse was decomposing in the next room, she was posting about God and Satan and letting divine justice handle things, all while she was literally living with the evidence of her own evil. Every lie she told was falling apart. Every story was being exposed as fiction. The evidence was overwhelming, and it all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Vanita Lennon had murdered Jason Bloomfield in cold blood, then spent 5 days living with his corpse while stealing his money and lying to everyone who cared about him. But Vanita's crimes didn't end with pulling the trigger. What she did after the murder shows a level of calculation that's truly disturbing. After dragging Jason's body into the small bedroom, Vanita went to work trying to erase the evidence of what she'd done. She grabbed Clorox, bleach, rags, and a mop and started scrubbing away Jason's blood. Picture this scene, y'all. A woman on her hands and knees mopping up her boyfriend's blood like it was spilled coffee. The smell of bleach mixing with the smell of death. The methodical way she cleaned, trying to make sure no trace of the murder remained. But cleaning up blood isn't as easy as it looks in the movies. Blood seeps into cracks, soaks into wood, leaves traces that forensic investigators can find, even when you think you've cleaned everything. Vanita learned this the hard way. After she finished cleaning, she moved a couch to block the bedroom door where Jason's body was hidden. This wasn't panic, this was planning. She was creating a barrier so that if anyone came to the apartment, they wouldn't accidentally discover what she'd done. But Vanita had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how much Jason's family loved him. She'd counted on them giving up, accepting her lies, and moving on with their lives. She was wrong, and that mistake was about to cost her everything. The investigation took months, but detectives were building an airtight case against Vanita Lennon. Every piece of evidence pointed to her. Every lie had been exposed. Every attempt to cover up her crime had failed. It was on May 2nd, 2025, that justice finally caught up with Vanita. A patrol officer in Fort Lauderdale recognized her from the arrest warrant and took her into custody. After months of thinking she'd gotten away with murder, her freedom was over. But the legal system wasn't done with her yet. When prosecutors looked at Vanita's criminal history, they saw a pattern that went way beyond this single murder. On May 5th, they filed what's called a career criminal felony case against her. This wasn't just about Jason's murder anymore. This was about a woman who had made crime her way of life, and the justice system was finally ready to hold her accountable for everything. The charges were serious: murder with a firearm and using a deceased person's personal information for fraud. That second charge came from her stealing Jason's money after she killed him, adding insult to the ultimate injury. On May 28th, Vanita stood before a judge for her arraignment. This was her chance to admit what she'd done, to show some remorse for destroying Jason's family and ending an innocent man's life. Instead, she pleaded not guilty to all charges, even with overwhelming evidence against her. Even with her lies completely exposed, Vanita was still trying to manipulate the system. She was still pretending to be the victim instead of the killer. The judge wasn't buying it. Vaughn was denied, meaning Vanita would stay locked up at the Paul Rain Detention Facility in Pompano Beach while she waited for trial. As of now, she's still there, still claiming innocence, still refusing to take responsibility for the cold-blooded murder of Jason Bloomfield. But the evidence speaks louder than her lies ever could. Jason Bloomfield should still be alive today. He should be cheering for the Miami Dolphins, working his shifts at Burger King, and spending time with his son. Instead, he's gone because the woman he trusted decided his life was worth less than her convenience. This case teaches us that evil can hide behind religious posts and fake tears. It shows us that financial stress can turn deadly when it meets the wrong person. Most importantly, it reminds us that we all have a responsibility to watch out for each other. Jason's 15-year-old son will carry the trauma of finding his father's body for the rest of his life. His grandmother will never forget that smell, that sight, that moment when their world fell apart. Vanita Lennon didn't just kill Jason, but she destroyed an entire family. But we can honor Jason's memory by learning from this tragedy. We can be more aware, more willing to speak up, and more ready to help when we see the warning signs, because every victim deserves to have their story told, and every family deserves justice. Thanks for watching. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We bring you true crime stories daily. 9 cases you know, and ones you don't. Stay with us as we shine a light on shadowed stories that need to be heard, because every victim deserves to have their story told.